looking at a deeper rooted problem here of a lust for attention. Your life depends on your neighbor's life. Education is essential. You need to fight for equality. You need to fight for healthcare as a right.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into my new show called Conversations. My name is Big Ben Hillman, and for those who don't know me, I'm a musician and a content creator from the Boston area. And I wanted to do this show really for no other reason than I just wanted to talk to some interesting people about some topics that I think are either interesting or important. And it's really not any more complicated than that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say right up front, I am not a politician, I'm not a political pundit, I'm not a doctor or a lawyer or really an expert in anything. I'm just a guy, a citizen, and a student of the world who has a curious mind. And I think by talking about some things that maybe are a little bit complicated, maybe we can learn something. So for my first episode, I had a chance to sit down with a good friend of mine. Her name is Erica Collins. Now, Erica got her start in the fashion world, both as a model and as a pageant queen. And then from there, she moved into doing radio and television. She's worked for a number of cable news networks, including both MSNBC and Fox News. And she's also worked on Capitol Hill as part of the Senate Radio TV Press Gallery. So she has a lot of experience with media. Currently, she can be heard doing two different podcasts. One is called Enterprise, and the other is called Pulse of the People. And both of those can be heard on blogtalkradio.com. Now, I will say this. I sat down with Erica on January the 13th of 2021. And between that time and the time that this episode actually goes live, a lot has changed. That's the world we live in. There's basically no such thing as a news cycle anymore. We're just constantly bombarded with change all the time. C'est la vie. Anyways, here's my conversation with Erica.
Here we are. How you doing?
Very well. And yourself?
I'm good. It's good to see you. I like your background. It looks very picturesque back there. I could see the Brooklyn Bridge, I think.
Yeah, we try.
Yeah. You guys got a serious budget going on over there. So. All right. Well, Erica, I've known you for a long time, and I won't say how long, but in the time that I've known you, you've hosted at least two different podcasts.
There's two podcasts and kind of more of a video element. So there's Why Talk Radio's Enterprise, which has been around since 2010, probably started actually in 2008. And it focuses on entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurial spirit, and businesses. It is focused on not just women, not just minorities, but all. But in this year, particularly with African American businesses and the coronavirus, we have done a lot of focusing on that aspect. Pulse of the People is a progressive platform. It's a progressive talk show. To talk about issues in the community.
I guess I wondered what was sort of the impetus behind doing Pulse, because obviously you say you've been doing Enterprise for a long time. It's focused on business and entrepreneurship. So doing this sort of political community activist kind of programming in Pulse, that's a little bit of a gear shift for you, isn't it?
Yes and no. I think that I've been working in government, working with people and social organizations pretty much all of my life. I was approached to be a co-host for a podcast, and we developed Pulse of the People to specifically focus on progressive issues.
And when you say progressive issues, I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, there's so many things going on in our society right now, and within the Democratic Party, there has been an emergence of people like AOC and other people within the party that have different views of where we should go as a democratic unit. So we kind of focus on things that surround that. We also talk about issues that center around Black Lives Matter, which a lot of people think that Black Lives Matter is specific to only African Americans, but there are a lot of cultures that are interested in Black Lives Matter and that platform.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if this summer showed us anything, it really showed us the interest that Black Lives Matter has, not just in the Black community, but across the board. I mean, anybody who's interested in social justice, in seeing, progressive platforms being achieved on a political level, in seeing significant changes being made in, the environment. It seems like a lot of people really congregated around BLM. I mean, what, if anything, I mean, what could you say is sort of the major energy behind this? Like what, I mean, obviously we saw a lot of incidents where it's like, okay, police brutality here, police brutality there, another death over here. And that's enough to get anybody riled up. But what was the sort of tipping point that just made everybody say, no, we're on board with this?
I think for 2020, it's George Floyd. It is watching a police officer in real time basically murder an African-American male. That was a devastating event that everyone watched during this time. And I think it compelled, especially millennial groups and social groups, to come together and say, this is not right. And we all need to work together to make a change.
You mentioned your work in government. You spent some time working on Capitol Hill. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that experience and also how you feel about the events that have gone on in this past week, what's being labeled as an insurrection.
The first thought watching the crowd basically mob, there was not a protest, was disgusting, disgraceful, and hurtful. Especially because I worked on the Capitol Hill. And I know when I was there, that environment was very friendly. It cared about you and your community, and it's doing the work of the people. And to watch the president incite this animalistic behavior caused trauma, I think, to the viewers, obviously to the people. It has resulted into, I think we're up to 5 deaths right now. It's surreal. It's unbelievable. And everyone who has an emotion or feeling about it needs to vocalize it. And it needs to be addressed, which is what's happening on Capitol Hill right now. There's some other feelings I have about how we came to this. And part of it is you have a president who fed into social media, and there are several different groups, radical groups, that were radicalized by the messaging, and they were used, and the messaging was used to create this horrible domestic terrorism. And the question for everyone is, how did we get here? When I was young in elementary school, I wrote a poem called, Money, Power, and Fame. This begins the game of survival that starts one's rival to achieve for the unknown so that others will drone. Are we free, or maybe we just can't see? I think I wrote that in like 8th grade. And wow. I can't believe that right now it's coming into fruition. And a lot of it has to do with our missteps in social media. As you see with the president, they're trying to hurry up and stop Twitter, stop certain things that were perpetuating this type of violence, terrorism.
Yeah.
And I think as people, we need to really look at how did we get here?
Yeah.
A lot of people will jump to racism, and it is racist. I mean, the groups that are up there are part of white supremacist groups. But also, you're looking at the state that we're in. We're in the coronavirus. We're in economic issues. There are so many social issues going on all at the same time. All of our infrastructures are being attacked at the same time. And it's resulted in domestic terrorism. The question really is, where do we go from here?
Well, and this situation, it didn't just spring up overnight. And when you keep leading people down this path towards, suspicion and division, and eventually it's going to take root and something's going to grow. And it seems to me the environment we're in now, with social media being what it is, that was just sort of the perfect fuel to just sort of get all of that stuff. Like I said, it's like a pressure pot that just is boiling over now. And you can't put the jack back in the box. It's out. It's here. We got to deal with it. And I think one of the things that I'm encouraged to hear a lot of legislators and law enforcement people talking about right now is that there needs to be accountability. We can't just say, well, it's over. Let's just get past it. Let's just move on. Like, there has to be some accountability. Would you agree with that?
What's important about these incidents that are within our legislation, you're starting to find out that, quote, this may be an inside job. You have members of law enforcement. You are now seeing videotape of potentially congressional leaders letting in rioters. And there needs to be and there probably is, an investigation going on as to how we got to the point of threatening the lives of our congressional leaders. With media in particular, sensational is definitely from the 80s, from the talk show circuits. I think you started to see a lot of sensationalism. And then with social media, one of the things that we're looking at that I think was a misstep is people don't really understand the concept of the Trump ecosystem. That you can have a person or a group of people where the only thing that they're seeing, if they're only watching Fox News, if all of their social media goes back to Proud Boys or all these different white supremacist groups that come up, if they only stay in a circle of their own friends and family members that think the same way, there's no challenge to their thought process. And it's almost like they're hypnotized into believing and thinking untruths, lies, which has caused the debates that you see online where people just can't seem to get through to a Trump supporter or a MAGA supporter. Because if they are seeing this on TV and their mom is saying that and their friends are saying the same thing, they believe that any question to it is a lie. So now there's being somewhat of a study into what created that Trump ecosystem. And a lot of that has to do with media, and a lot of that has to do with social media. And again, we propose the question, how do we begin to fix it? And yes, everyone who is involved in creating not a protest, but a mob riot that appears to have had intentions on potentially assassinating congressional leaders. And you even hear the chants of people talking about our vice president. We have left the country in a national security issue, a major national security issue. And sometimes people get so wrapped up in the dialogue between other issues, that they're really missing the bigger picture of how we are now perceived by the entire world.
Yeah, the world is watching, that's for sure. I wonder, thinking about this and, how we got to this place and the whole, the sort of, the bubbles, the echo chambers that we all live in. How do you think, if at all, does education play into which side of that wall that you fall on, and how much you're going to dig your heels into something, whether or not it's even true? I mean, is there something to the educational system that we give to our citizens and their abilities to think critically that has kind of brought us down this road?
It's a good question. I think the first thing you'd have to do is take statistics of the people who can't seem to critically think. Take the statistics of the majority of the people that you saw on Capitol Hill that participated in the violent actions. Education is essential to every aspect of our community, every aspect of our society, every aspect of business, for us to progress as American people. But again, critical thinking is a very good point, because you can go to a school of thought that is basically what you saw. You have to be in an environment that challenges that. And so education is definitely essential, but I think we're looking at a deeper rooted problem here of a lust for attention, a lust for attention is the first word that comes to me, but I haven't figured out the articulation where there's suddenly a hatred for people who are educated, for people who have achieved some certain amount of success. Another thing I want to bring to point is specifically Gen X, because we focus a lot on millennials, we focus on Gen Z. We know the story of baby boomers. Gen X, particularly a certain part of just kind of the younger half, since 9/11, has been struck by the 9/11 crisis, the dot-com boom and bust, the credit crisis, the mortgage crisis, and on and on and on for the last 20 years. And if you look at a certain group of X, every time they started to kind of get their lives going, something came and slammed them down. And it's similar in Cobra Kai when you're looking at, I forget the character's name, but opposite Ralph Macchio, where he's constantly getting slapped down every time he gets ready to, restart his life and try to do good in society. If you were to take some of the statistics of the people involved in the anger that they're expressing, is probably being expressed in the wrong way towards the wrong people about their place in society. But then you have minority groups who are looking at what we saw on Capitol Hill were basically suburban or rural white people, which would be classified as white privilege, hence how things got so out of control, as opposed to a BLM protest. Why are they so angry when society and everything about American society is catering to them? When it was happening, I was watching CNN with Anderson Cooper. And as you know, Anderson Cooper came out as gay, and he has a husband, and they just had a child. And he was looking at it in the sense of all of the oppressed groups in American society, African Americans, gays, based on race, based on religion, based on all other things that they have fought for. Never has any of those groups ever mobbed Capitol Hill, the Million Man March. I was around when the Million Man March happened. Peaceful protests, Martin Luther King, No one has disrespected our American society as much as this one incident in this one day amongst what is really classified as white Americans with a certain amount of white privilege. You know, their own strength is being used against them. There are pictures of white males with the American flag beating, who happens to be in New Jersey, I'm from New Jersey, police officer, Capitol Hill Police, who was unconscious. I don't know what the reports are, whether he was actually dead while he was lying there or was called dead after that point. And these are the same people who had a problem with Kaepernick kneeling.
Yes.
Protest.
Right. Yeah.
And saying that he, you know, was being disgraceful and not supporting the American flag and not supporting our police and unpatriotic. And that picture of that mob beating and killing a Capitol Hill police officer is way more than 1,000 words.
The hypocrisy of all of that should not be lost on anyone with eyes and half a brain, really. And I'm glad that President-elect Biden came up and actually said as much. You know, I said if this was a Black Lives protest, they would have been treated entirely different. And the fact that, yes, it's white privilege that allowed these, you know, insurrectionists to come in and be treated as if they were not a threat, as if they were just, you know, they're, you know, expressing their grievances when in fact they were there for very odious purposes. You know, that is the picture of white privilege, isn't it? We've obviously spent about the last year living in this crazy pandemic. It's changed what normal is for all of us. Before that happened, you were doing some speaking live, I guess, to audiences, mostly women. What sort of message would you have for them now? And what will you hope to achieve whenever this pandemic has finally been eradicated? What will be your hopes then moving forward?
Well, I was speaking to women based on empowerment for business and etc. And also because I was running for office. And one of the things that was very interesting, I met two women. One was a school teacher, one was a nurse. And we were talking about Medicare for all, healthcare, the issues surrounding that topic. And this was just before we were put on lockdown. And they kept kind of humming and hawing like, no, I don't think everyone should have had, well, kind of, well. And I would love to know what their thoughts are now, because if anything, coronavirus shows you that your life depends on your neighbor's life. It depends on everyone in the world right now. We have about 6 variants they haven't even talked about with this virus, because we have allowed poverty, social injustice, economic injustice to continue here in the United States and in the world. And now we are facing the worst pandemic of our lifetime. So the message for all of Americans, all women throughout the world and here is, you need to fight for equality. You need to fight for healthcare for all, healthcare as a right. And if anything, the coronavirus is showing you that healthcare isn't just about healthcare. If you don't have the proper infrastructure for this, you won't be able to work. You will be home. You will be with a loved one or not be able to see a loved one in a hospital, and your life depends on it. basic income movements, etc. You're starting to see this is making everything in our society make us look at it with a magnifying glass. And it is really the time now to see how we can progress and how we can come up with solutions to make our society go forward.
I mean, really, all of those things that you just mentioned, I mean, healthcare, income, issues of class, I mean, it's all interconnected so delicately, and we don't look at it that way, or we're not conditioned, I guess, to look at it that way. And it seems to me that just going on like it's not sustainable anymore to continue on that trajectory. Is there something we're missing that would help us to sort of look at the bigger picture?
Well, the easiest answer in changing is vote. But also, what people need to understand is the process. And that goes back to what we were discussing with education. You should be on the phone right now if you believe the president should be impeached, calling your congressional leaders, going online and seeing what the issues are and voicing your opinions, going to community organizers and events and participating. This is the first time in our history where it appears most of us are home. So you have time to research and look up these issues and voice your concerns and move forward. Simply telling your story. A lot of times people are being honest with each other because, they're in this world of social media, or they're trying to showcase that they're the billionaire Donald Trump, but we're really $1 billion in debt. So you need to tell the truth. What is your truth? Because those are the things that help legislation to make policies and for you to be counted and to hold them accountable.
Before we go, I wanted to give you an opportunity if there was anything else that you wanted to get off your chest while we're having this conversation. And if you want to let people know where they can find more information about you and the projects you have going on, etc.
You can always just simply Google Erica Collins. The show Blog Talk Radio's Enterprise, if anyone has a small business, they're entrepreneur, they can always look at that page and email. And if you have social issues that you want to discuss, we have Blog Talk Radio's Pulse of the People.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Erica.
Same here. Good to see you.
I want to thank Erica Collins for taking the time to sit down and talk with me on my first episode of my new show, Conversations. And I want to thank you for taking the time to give us a listen. If you're watching on YouTube, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be updated every time I upload a new episode of the show. Join me next time when my guest will be author and podcaster Andy Mascola. Until then, take care.